So before we actually jump into, how you are disrupting your classrooms and what that means to each and every one of you, but I would like to know, what does disruption mean for you and your institution? Because it might mean several different things in different institutions. So Sally, can you kick us off?
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for coming to our session. So I work at a 200-year-old institution in the UK, so King's College London. And some of the things that we have seen here today would blow their minds, because that was well above and beyond the disruption that I could probably introduce at a very research-intensive Russell Group institution, although we are trying. I remember, I suppose for me, disruption has been really just challenging a lot of the status quos, and that awful phrase, we've always done it like this. So that's the way that we're going to carry on doing it like that. So a lot of the last 3 or 4 years has been change management for me. But I think, I'll give you an example. When I joined King's College London, so this was 3.5 years ago, I was on a panel about the future of the lecture. And there were students there were staff there, and I said, I think let's move away from the lecture, let's move away from the didactic lecture, and let's tear out the tiered lecture rooms, which was interesting that we were commenting on the room layout here. And people were horrified. So it's like, who is this person coming into King's College saying we should get rid of the tiered? Really simple things. But I also said, why are we using exams? So I have to say, in the business school at King's, I joined, there was like 90% exams. And again, they were horrified. So although many of our institutions have probably removed those completely, for them, that was quite disruptive, because this is the way we teach, and we haven't really seen a different way to do that. And what I'm really pleased to say is there has been an evolution in that thinking, and we can talk about that disruption. But I think for us, we live in this kind of what has been described as vortex of change. Black Lives Matter, we've got war in Ukraine, we have COVID that we experience, and we cannot continue to teach the way that we have done before. It just doesn't work. We have a model that's 2,000 years old. We just reach out and speak to students and hope that they might magically absorb information. So for me, that has been disrupting the status quo that has probably existed for 200 years in our institution.
Very interesting. Adrian, what's your take on this?
Okay, well, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Sally, for that insight into King's. And I was down the road at Imperial, so I know what you're speaking about. INSEAD is a lot younger, but it's already 63 years old, believe it or not. So it's becoming an older institution by some measures. And INSEAD, since its inception, coming in as a sort of being the business, what the goal was originally was to be the Harvard of Europe. And in fact, a lot of the early professors came from Harvard. But INSEAD, I would say, has been pretty good at adapting to the changing world over those 63 years. We opened up a campus in Singapore in 2000 and one in Abu Dhabi in 2008. So we sort of adapted as the development needs around the world have changed. Having said that, one of the things I was teaching before the pandemic was disruption, particularly with our executive education clients, sort of big companies going and saying, how can you have a more sort of agile mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, and how can you preempt disruption? And I think we were confronted at INSEAD, as were other institutions, with massive disruption that we hadn't imagined when the pandemic came along in March 2020. And suddenly we had to look at ourselves and say, well, we've been teaching all of this stuff, but how do we deal with disruption in the education space? And it wasn't that easy at first, but we'll talk more about how that process was managed. But I could see the challenges on two sides. One is on the content side, and also on the mindset of the faculty. So, generally good faculty, those who are very popular in class and good at teaching, have content that they've been working on and honing for years. And the last thing you want to do is have to change your content. And this is a big challenge as the themes change. If we look at fintech, for instance, it's very difficult for a traditional finance professor, and correct me if I'm wrong, and with all due respect to my finance colleagues, but it's very difficult to teach fintech if you've been teaching the traditional model of finance, the DCF calculations and stuff like that. Suddenly all this new stuff appears, and you find that actually the people who are best at teaching that, or who have the greatest knowledge, are 22-year-old undergrads who are studying computer science. So I think there's been a challenge on the content side, and then there's a challenge on how do you actually change, even once you've got your head around the content and the tools and how we're going to teach it, is how do we change the mindset of the faculty to be able to deliver.
Thank you, Adrian. Dov, can you give us your perspective on how Reichman University sees disruption?
Sure. Well, I can't really speak for the university as a whole. I can speak for, I guess, what I've been doing. And I like how we're going down in ages. So Sally represents a 200-year-old institution and Adrian a 63-year-old institution. My institution is 27 years old, so we're young and spry. And I see disruption on my end is essentially challenging the disruption that's coming on the other end from the students. So how many of you in the room just got a tweet or a WhatsApp or some Facebook message that's gotten you to look down at your phone for a second? That's a disruption that I see in my class every day. I can't beat this. This technology is designed to be as addictive as possible. And every year they're coming out with a new device that's more addictive and takes eyeballs away from me and onto the device. So this is my biggest problem when I'm sitting in front of a lecture, regardless of whether or not it's like this, like a lecture hall, or whether or not we're sitting around a table or we're on Zoom. This will always be my biggest enemy in my classroom. And so for me, disruption is trying to figure out a way to beat this device. And I've tried a bunch of things to do that. Principally, I try to fight fire with fire. So I use a lot of pop culture in my educational process, where we're watching Hollywood to sort of fight the Hollywood, right? So half my students are watching Netflix on their screens, and hopefully the other half are watching Netflix that I'm showing them. Another area is using sort of emerging technologies, so using VR, AR, using those sort of devices in the classroom and engaging the students that way so they can't physically actually access their devices. So for me, disruption is fighting the disruption that has been presented to me, and I do my best. But that's it.
Thank you, Dov.
Thank you.
So you actually led right into my next question, which is application of disruption in the classroom. So Adrian, Sally, can you perhaps give us some examples of how your faculty at your institutions disrupt the classroom and engage the learners, right?
Can do. I mean, I agree with Dov. We lost the classroom in 2007, really, with Apple phones, with WhatsApp. And it's interesting because I don't think many of our academics appreciated that we had actually done that. And I think what has happened gradually has been the utilization of the phones, in terms of the polls, in terms of actually having Twitter kind of feeds that are developed by students and having that tech that they are actually kind of using in the class. And that was really quite significant in, now I've described a 200-year-old university in terms of actually that co-creation. So I suppose from my side, there's been probably three areas where that disruption has played out. One has been with faculty. The second is the voice and the role of students has taken a very different approach. And thirdly, that disruption has happened in more of an inclusive education. I know there's a session later on, but that has really challenged King's, particularly in terms of diversity and inclusion and how that plays out in a curriculum and how you might demonstrate that. So I think with academics, there is a risk-averse nature to faculty, certainly my faculty, and this has been dominated, unfortunately, by things like professional development reviews, personal module evaluations. You need to get 3.5 out of 5. I don't know how it works in your own institutions. And what really struck me when I joined King's was a real concern that their modular evaluations would be affected by doing anything different. Because our students are quite traditional as well. You know, on that panel that I was talking about, the students were like, be like lectures. I said, no, you don't. You think about something else. But what was interesting is giving staff the freedom to try something without a kind of a negative impact. And I had to stand up in rooms like this and say to staff, try something. If it's from a good place, you want to give the best learning experience. If your module evaluations dive, please do not worry about it, and we put the safety net in place. But that had to take some quite strong messaging to be able to facilitate that. So certainly for my own faculty, just developing that appetite for the unknown, but also resourcing it. So every year maybe this is a large amount or small amount, but just in the business school alone, we provide £100,000 for innovation ideas. And these are just small things that staff can try, whether it be a little sim or whether it be a little game, but it's a seed fund, I think, that's made the difference. If I can just quickly say, secondly, I think that the disruptions happen by listening and engaging with the students. And I know that sounds like it's an obvious thing, but that hasn't necessarily happened. You know, you have the rep system, so students are consulted on various things, but we didn't have students at the heart of the educational governance, co-creating opportunities, experiences with our staff. And that has been really fundamental in some of the disruption, because they have led on that. In terms of what our new learning spaces look like, co-designing those spaces, I did manage to clear out one lecture room and have an open space because they wanted to work with each other. They didn't want to be lectured at, and I know that's a model that many people use. But I think we have had to listen to our students in that space. In terms of, we've got maths tutors, we have peer tutors, but they're all students. And that has disrupted who teaches, who supports. And that's been so powerful that every single one of our students, when they come in now, has a maths tutor who is a student. And that's really made the difference. And if I could say just thirdly, being a 200-year-old university, we have been built on colonialism, if I can put it that way, and to challenge the cases, the resources, the examples that our faculty use has been problematic. It's all white old men, and I noticed all the pictures outside, actually, they're all old white men. That was what our curriculum looked like. And, thankfully, we're working with various different publishers, including Harvard Publishing, but that's represented, to kind of give us examples from the Global South. Let's try and diversify. Let's ensure that our students are reflected, from their own backgrounds, but even just, they see themselves in our curriculum. That has been a major disruptor because faculty generally are not black. They are not from ethnic minorities. And so I think that has been a real challenge in many ways. But we're getting there.
Great, thank you so much. Adrian, can you share some insights?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm going to send my CV to Sally. If you want to increase the number of black professors, we can quickly change that. So it's funny what you're saying about experimentation and being punished for experimenting, because that's something, with the courses I teach, we talk about, you have to experiment and, celebrate failure. But we definitely don't do that ourselves. I think at INSEAD, at least before the pandemic, if you got less than 4.3 out of 5, you get called, as a faculty, you get called into the dean's office to her dressing down. It's a bit like going to see the headmaster. But of course, that definitely does not encourage faculty to experiment because you want to just assure. And when I direct programs, I have faculty saying, I'm not going to teach on your program because it's too risky. And, I don't want to get my ratings down. So that is a challenge. But in terms of what we have done in terms of experimentation, and coming to what Dove was saying in terms of embracing the menace, if you like, which is the phone, we've been working on live cases, which are actually just distributed through Harvard Business Publishing. And these are what we like to see as the next generation of case studies. So we combine the traditional case study methodology, which is proven, apparently 100 years. Harvard have just celebrated 100 years since the first case. And that works, but how can we bring that into the modern world? So what we do is we make the cases what we call live, in that it's a story which the students get involved in as protagonists. It's a bit like a simulation, except it runs on their phones, it runs on their laptops. And to the extent at some of the funner cases, we have them actually receiving, in the middle of class, they'll get a message on their phone from the production director saying there's been an accident in the factory, what are you going to do? And it's fine for them to get up and leave class and go and deal with it. So things like that, making it really real and visceral and interactive. So combining role-playing, traditional case methodology, interactive technology, using mobile and web technology. So that's one of the things we've been doing to sort of innovate and bring the traditional teaching into let's say, the modern world.
Sounds like a lot of fun being your student.
It is, until you get the phone call in the middle of the night. We have done that as well.
Yeah, that's very engaging. So I just wanted to kind of spice things up a little bit and play devil's advocate. So do we really need to disrupt the education sector? Dov, you want to take this one?
Sure. I think so. I think that thinking that we're going to continue doing the exact same thing over and over with results that are not satisfactory will result in better results is not going to happen. And I think professors and teachers are facing a different world. We're facing digital natives, Gen Z, Gen Alpha at this point, even millennials, all these sorts of students that come with a different mindset, have a whole different world view than students in previous generations. And to think that we can just apply the same technology or the same teaching methodologies over and over is foolhardy and I think also short-sighted. So yes, I think we do need to disrupt. And I also just want to say, disruption doesn't have to be sort of technology-oriented. One type of thing that I do for my students, and I shouldn't be saying this, but I'll say it anyways, so keep it between us, is that I let the students pick what we want to learn, what we're going to learn. So I teach courses in law school on law and technology, and there's a whole host. FinTech is one area, but there's a whole host of issues that we can tackle. And I give the students a choice. I say, here are 20 topics that we can cover over the semester. It's up to you. I want you to choose because I want you to be more engaged. I want you to be more part of the discussion. And if you choose, we'll talk about things that you're interested in. And full disclosure, I kind of know what I'm going to do before I let them choose. And so it's the illusion of choice that I give them. But they still feel that they have choice. You know, it's like the thing in tall modern buildings where they found that people complain less if there is a thermostat in the room and they can control the temperature, even though the thermostat's a dummy temperature, they find that complaints go down. Same sort of thing in an educational environment, giving the students control over what they're learning and what they're studying, at least, or even the illusion of control, is a way to disrupt the classroom and doesn't have to be high tech.
Could I add? I mean, I should have said, I lead inclusive education at King's as well, and coming back to that disruption of this, doing the same thing, expecting different results. I mean, I know that's a kind of an Einstein quote, but what we have seen, particularly in the UK, is what we call an awarding or attainment gap, particularly our black students, and that is widening. Our disabled students, that is widening because of the same way of teaching, and actually to be able to disrupt in so much so that actually it levels that playing field, to be actually thinking about that diversity and equality, I think, makes a huge difference. Whereas the second quick thing I would say is, we're all talking to employers, and employers are not interested in what our students can regurgitate in exams. What they are interested in, that change agility, that growth mindset, that resilience, that confidence, to be able to. So how are we doing that is, examples that, Dov has outlined. My own module, I give them 7 or 8 real client briefs. You can choose which brief you want. It might be an LGBT charity, or it might be how you create a sustainability campaign for a bank. And they all do that. But what is lovely is actually a year after, those organisations are coming back to the students saying, can you present to our board? We like that idea. Can you do this? And it has a life beyond the assessment. And so I think if we're really dedicated and really care about our students being prepared for the future world, then I don't think there's a choice in having to actually disrupt the way we teach, because we are doing them a disservice if we continue in the way that we have done, and I'm talking about the older institutions, and we don't change. So I think for me, it's an absolute yes.
Adrian, do you want to add, or should we go into the next question?
I think we can go. I haven't got much to add,
Okay.
except the short answer is yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think so too. So now I'm going to go a little bit into trending topics. So everybody's talking about the metaverse, and I would love to hear your perspectives on what does metaverse mean for education, and how do you see it applied, yourselves in the classroom or at your institutions?
Well, I think we should start with saying, what is the metaverse, right? What do we mean by the metaverse? Is it Internet 3.0? Is it blockchain? Is it some sort of crypto-based internet? Is it Internet 2+? And I think there's a whole bunch of ways that we can define the metaverse. Do we need VR to access it? Is another question. But I see the metaverse as just a more engaging internet. However you do it, it's just, instead of, Internet 1.0 was, GeoCities. If anyone had a GeoCity site, I had a GeoCity site on Yahoo. Internet 2.0 is sort of, people creating content, and Internet 3.0, or the metaverse, is sort of is engaging intimately within the metaverse, not interacting with the metaverse, but really being part of the internet. So to that end, I actually use the metaverse a lot. I actually teach a course called Law of the Metaverse in the Metaverse, and we actually all put on the goggles, because that's the coolest way to do it. We all put on the goggles and we all engage each other in the metaverse. And so when we talk about things like assault in the metaverse, we can better appreciate what that means. When we talk about fashion law in the metaverse, we can actually better appreciate what we mean by that, rather than just me getting up and lecturing or throwing up some slides of what this looks like. The students actually get to experience it firsthand, and it makes a whole host of difference for them to do that. So sure, metaverse right now is a buzzword, but everyone says it'll be a $5 trillion business in a couple years. Everyone's investing hundreds of billions of dollars collectively in this thing, and so this is where we're going. So we might as well engage it now and find out how to best use it.
Adrian?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about the metaverse, and I know people are like, it's rubbish, and it's just a fad. But having been in the 3D business in the early days, my first company was a 3D visualization animation company in 1993, right at the beginning of 3D technology, and it's really exciting to see where it's at now and where it could be. And I think one of the problems at the moment is people can only they can't really imagine the potential because they see, these clunky avatars which look pretty rubbish, to be honest, stomping around this cartoony environment. And so it looks a bit, not very good. And, I had a space on Second Life. So that was a good experiment, I thought, considering it was the mid-2000s. But again, if you think that's the metaverse, then you'll think, well, that's pretty rubbish too. So I think if you think, though, about what it would be like with goggles that are really light, or maybe we don't even need to wear goggles, we can just wear normal spectacles, and we're in a real photorealistic environment where we can have a classroom where it feels like this. Wouldn't that be amazing? Where we could have students from Australia, from Namibia, from Argentina, all together, people who wouldn't be able to be here in Madrid at this time. I mean, I think that would be really cool. And that will come. That will come. The technology's getting there. And so I think it's going to be a fabulous way and an amazing addition to what we can do. And we can then start to do courses on Mars, and so we can defy the laws of gravity. We're not constrained by all the things we have in the physical world. One small example, it's not really the metaverse, but we are using at INSEAD VR cases now, and I taught one recently, a production case around digital transformation in a tractor factory. And that factory is in Western France, and normally we take the students to the factory, and it takes 3 hours to get there from Fontainebleau and 3 hours to get back. Here we could do it. I did it with a group of Turkish participants from one of our executive education clients. And it was great. In the classroom like this, we wore the headsets. They were able to visit the factory. We were able to discuss the challenges of digital transformation in this factory. And it was really super effective. And it wasn't yet the metaverse, but it was a 3D immersive environment where we could really teach, So yeah, I'm very positive about it. But I'm a bit of a geek.
I won't. These are the experts, and I didn't want to call you a geek, but you're more geeky than I am in the metaverse. But I get very excited. I'd love for IE students, for example, to come into the same classroom in the metaverse as London students and to work on the same projects and the same assessments. And that, that's a conversation we've been having, but the how is missing. So maybe the metaverse would be that opportunity. So I love that idea, and I think I'd be investing in that.
Yes, exciting times ahead. I also am very eager to see what the metaverse has in store for us. So I just want to open the questions to the audience for these last couple minutes. So any questions out there to this amazing panel?
Stun them.
Okay,
Don't be shy.
don't be shy.
If they were all in avatars in the metaverse, they wouldn't
Yeah.
have anything to be shy.
They'd be braver with a chat function or in Zoom.
You can text us your question if you want.
Should we pull out the Kahoot?
Another one as well.
But I think what we see here is one of the things that disruption can bring to the classroom. And oftentimes, for example, I've taught in Singapore where students don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to stand out. And you'll have classrooms where you'll have a lot of people who want to ask questions. I'm sure you guys are full of questions, but don't want to stand out, don't want to be that one person, or feel like their question isn't good enough for whatever reason. And what the technology allows us, at least in the classrooms, I use something like Poll Everywhere, where all the students can interact digitally in real time with everyone else, and they can say things anonymously, and I don't have to worry about, oh, this is a silly question, or no one's going to care what I'm saying, or something like that. And it's all anonymous. So those sorts of disruptive sort of technologies are very important for the classroom, particularly when you're dealing with students that don't want to stand out and don't want to, in a world where, they're always on, where social media has made it so that they're always present and they always have to be present. If they feel like they can not be present in a classroom for a couple of minutes, then they will. And so the opportunity to be present without actually anyone knowing who you are is a huge sort of advantage to disrupt the classrooms.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think some of those polls can be incredibly helpful as educators and learners, because actually, if you say, right, you throw a question out to the class, you're not going to get any answers, but actually if you say, anyone that's uncertain about this particular topic or this area, and then a poll, and if you're getting 100% of students that just don't get it or can't answer it, that's telling you as an educator something, rather than actually highlighting it and targeting individuals, and that's been really helpful. I think the second follow-up question would be, how confident are you with your answer? And I think, again, if the confidence levels are done, that's telling you something as well. So I think from an educator's perspective, that's incredibly powerful, as well as the students being able to say something and not raise their hand, say.
I think there was a question there. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was answered already, but what I wanted to ask is, we're talking about disruptiveness, about how the classroom has changed, about how how the interaction with the students have changed as well. And we just observed that people will be shy to ask a question. That's something that has always been like that. I don't know how to formulate this. This new situation we have right now, where we have more technology, where people generally are shyer, I would say. At least that's what I experience with my students. But then again, you have more means of contacting teachers outside and not exposing yourself as much. How does that change the interaction from your view between teachers and students? Does it mean that the students are perceived more as individuals because they can actually interact not in front of a whole audience, or does it make the exact opposite? Is it, is everybody just so much shyer that you don't actually see the students individually?
I can start. It's such an interesting question because it's so challenging for academics, and I manage quite a lot of the academics, and they're saying, Sally, we are experiencing cognitive overload because I have my students contacting me on emails, they contact me on Teams, they contact me in the classroom and in polls. So actually, I think what you're alluding to is actually in some ways, it's making the job of an educator much, much more difficult, and we probably need to draw back a little bit and have some guidelines. And I think some academics will be like, just, I will reply 24/7, but that sets a very unfortunate kind of benchmark for other academics in terms of their own well-being and mental health. So I think that is a question for us: is how far is too far in terms of actually engaging with digital technology? Sometimes old school works absolutely fine for me. You know, a post-it note as you leave the door. Just tell me a question that you've got, and I'll just collect the post-it notes at the end. And that's actually quite a nice. They call them exit tickets, but actually then you don't need any kind of tech, but you're getting it in real time. So from my side, I think we probably do need more guidance in terms of actually the use of this multiplicity of tech communication avenues. But I don't know what my colleagues think.
Go ahead, Dov, because
I mean, I'm bad at interacting with students offline or online. I just tell them all the time, like, I will ignore you and just keep on emailing me and getting in touch with me because eventually I will notice you. That's my way of dealing with that issue. And to that end, I think, we're living also in a world where, going back to this trope of the generations and stuff like that, but I think the younger generations experience a much more sort of flatter hierarchy, and they see the professor as a friend or a buddy or something like that. And to some degree, that's great, and it allows them to interact with them. But I think to some degree, you also need them to step back and not think that, you're not their best friend. You're there to be the educator and the grown-up in the room and lead sort of discussion. So I think oftentimes, having too much connectivity or too much interaction can be damaging to sort of the teacher-student relationship that to some degree needs to be there. Not as it used to be in King's College 200 years ago, but not super flat. I think there needs to be a little bit of a hierarchy just to make sure that things stay on track and students don't hijack the classroom.
I think also maybe redesigning the way the classes are formed. It does depend a little bit on how many students you have, but I like to actually have a lot of contact in small groups with the students. So, of course, that's not possible if you have 500 students, but if you have a class of 30, you can have groups of 5 and meet them for half an hour. So the Socratic method, that's used a lot in probably at King's, but certainly in Oxbridge, Oxford and Cambridge, you spend a lot of time with your tutor. And so I've tried to bring that into my teaching. That's really effective because it gives a release valve for the students who haven't understood something. They can then ask those questions in a smaller group where they're less likely to be shy and not speak up.
I'll add one more thing to that, and talking about disruption, so we haven't mentioned Zoom, which is one of those big disrupting technologies, although we have a Teams person here. But one of the problems, particularly in the hybrid world of Zoom, where you have students in a classroom and then students online, and I find this all the time, is that they actually don't have a voice, even though they have the chat and they have the opportunity. As someone who's standing up in front of a classroom of students, I can't pay attention to the students and to the lecture and to the lesson and to where I want to go and to the rolling chat that goes on the side. And so to some degree, the technology makes them even less heard than before. And I deal with that perhaps inefficiently by just delegating to the students. I say, I need someone in the classroom who's going to be in charge and be the voice for those students who otherwise won't have a voice. So I just to reiterate, I don't think that more opportunities to connect always make it more likely that you will connect. But like we said, overload is a huge problem in connecting with students, and the technology doesn't always make it easier.
Lots of questions now.
Yes, please.
Hi. Thank you very much for your conversation. It's really setting. I've just one question for you three. Well, actually two. What's the most challenging issue you face as university related to technology and disruptive technology? And what should be your piece of advice for teachers? I guess we have a lot of teachers here. As regards disruptive technology or technology in general. Thank you very much.
Want to take this one?
Yeah, I can kick off. Fear. Massive fear from our teaching staff. Teams was new. It's like, what is that? Asking to record lectures. That was like, you're telling me what? I'm just going to speak for 2 hours and record it. They soon realised that 2 hours speaking to a video wasn't. So actually, by doing sometimes helped. for me, the key thing was peer-to-peer learning in a small space and in a safe space. So what I mean by that, and I mentioned it to a few colleagues yesterday, but what I saw was an incredibly powerful learning experience where a couple of colleagues, at lecture level, so, quite junior, but had tried something, tried online, and actually ran a number of lunch workshops and things like that where colleagues could just come in and listen to them because these colleagues had already done it, tried it, and could basically say, avoid that, don't do that, but actually this worked for me. And actually being able to provide the time, and that can be a challenge for educators, and I think there needs to be paid time and time in the timetable for colleagues to just get together and share just something. Give me 2 top tips about how to record my session, or 2 top tips about how I might assess that's not an exam, actually was the most powerful thing. And we got through, I said we had a good pivot during COVID because of that community sharing and because of that peer knowledge that perhaps didn't exist in the past in terms of that facilitating of thought, and they stayed in silos. But actually being able to bring, we have 7 departments in the business school, and actually all 7 suddenly started talking with each other and sharing these experiences. So for us, that was the key thing.
And one thing I would add, and I absolutely agree with you, Sally, but also the importance of the support staff. So often, at least in where I teach, our staff were much better with the tech than the faculty, and they were a really important part of the equation in terms of a successful transition to the technology. And unfortunately, and I don't speak just for INSEAD, I think in most institutions, the staff, the hierarchy of faculty staff, it's sort of, the faculty are these gods and the superstars, and the staff are not always that well treated. And that has to change, because these people are, of course, very important and a key part, especially as we become more digital and we use more technology. And they can also be fantastic enablers. And in the case of INSEAD, we had a lot of our staff helping in the training of the faculty and during the courses, being able to handle things when they went wrong. The importance of everyone else in the organization.
I think on my end, I think thinking that technology will be the answer is a huge concern. When you thinking that, and I don't want to pick on Zoom, but I'll pick on Zoom. Thinking that teaching via Zoom is the same thing by teaching in the classroom. And this is where the metaverse actually comes in, because, for example, teaching via Zoom, you're not making any eye contact. You're not connecting with the person on the other side of the screen, and they're not connecting with you. You have no real way of knowing how engaged they are, whether or not they're multitasking and really not paying attention. And yet we see lots of institutions that are now defaulting to Zoom and saying, oh, we can run this on Zoom. It'll be great. It's just like being in a classroom. And the reality is, it really isn't. There's Zoom fatigue. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens. There's the lack of cameras, the lack of interface, the lack of communication. And this is one area I think where the metaverse could help. The new Meta's new Quest Pro, actually allows you to have facial to assess what your face is doing, to see whether or not you're winking or moving your cheeks in such a way. The little cues, that those micro expressions that we as humans have evolved to pick up. We don't really see them in Zoom. We're not really talking to each other in Zoom, but we do see that perhaps in the metaverse. And so, going way back to that question of, where's the metaverse in this area, is it will make a better Zoom. It will make a better sort of interaction between the lecturer and the student. I don't know if I even answered your question, but.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is up, but thank you for sharing your insights this afternoon, and thank you for your time. A round of applause, please.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done. Thank you.